All right, good morning. Welcome. This session is regarding policies and regulations. So good morning to the people in the room as well as online. We will be sticking to our 20-minute for each presentation. We may not get to all the questions, but just remember you can continue to converse with the speakers through the Hover app, okay? So let's bring on our first speaker covering regulations governing agritourism. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for coming to this session on Thursday morning, bright and early after a great afternoon yesterday, right? My name is Alexia Kulwiec, and I'm Executive Director of Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. We are a nonprofit organization that provides legal representation and policy work, I will say in the United States, representing independent farmers, food producers, and consumers as well. So I do know the other two sessions for this section have to do with agritourism in India. I am not an expert on rules and policies on agritourism in India. I can hardly wait to learn more about that. I will be sticking a little bit more on United States laws and regulations that arise in agritourism. Down advances. Down advances. Can you advance over there? Thank you. So one thing I do want to point out, and this is true in the United States as well as internationally, is that the number one thing, the starting place in determining relevant laws and regulations is going to be your definition of agritourism. This varies tremendously. So what we see in a lot of international codes as well as a lot of state laws here in the United States are broad definitions that it's a commercial venture on farms, ranches, and aquaculture that attracts visitors connected to agriculture for educational purposes, recreation, or entertainment. And we go on. Can I? Oh, I think I can. Now it's working. Great. Okay, so the USDA here in the United States definition is simply hunting, fishing, farm or wine tours, hay rides, etc. As a lawyer, I love when the laws say etc. That's really gives me a lot of leeway, right? Lots of fun. But here in the United States, individual states will then have their own definitions. And the reason this is so important, particularly for farms and ranches in the United States, is that there are certain exemptions in agriculture to certain federal or state laws that will not exist for agritourism. How you are taxed, how you are zoned may differ whether you're agriculture producing food, livestock, crops, etc., or you are agritourism, which is more of a commercial operation intended to be running a business on the same property. So determining that definition is really important for figuring out really which laws will be covered and how you will be regulated. So a lot of states will add farmers markets, overnight accommodations, you pick, wedding, animal rides, and petting zoos into the definition. So, and then again, I think I have coming up in the slides, but both internationally and in a lot of US states, we do see some positive legislation. We see legislation that helps provide support to farms to engage in agritourism as a way to increase revenue, right? We also see, particularly in US states, but internationally as well, rules that protect the producers or agritourism operators from liability from injury or illness caused by their operations. So this is one that on behalf of a lot of smaller independent farms, I come across a lot. There will be requirements for folks to meet, and as long as those requirements are met, there are in fact protections to the farm from any personal injury. It's a different venue than a lot of businesses, right? And making sure that they're perfectly safe and that no harm could ever happen tends to be impossible, right? On 50 acres of land. We'll get a little bit more into the liability in a few moments, but protection against liability is one of the important aspects of agritourism law, I would say. And then, as I mentioned, there's exemptions, at least in the United States, to many of the other rules and regulations if you are in agriculture, but not agritourism. So that might include certain things in terms of building codes. You can have more buildings on agricultural land, for example, than residential land. So building codes, you're taxed differently, animal welfare regulations, a number of things will be different, some of which we'll touch on in a few moments. So I look at that and think, my goodness, there's all of these laws and regulations, and I'm a farmer and I just want to bring in extra revenue. So first, of course, we take a deep breath. And some of you, of course, might even consider yoga as that agritourism. Okay, so I'm starting with federal law, and we'll then move into a little bit more about what to expect in various state laws. In the United States, there is no one overarching agritourism law, right? There simply isn't. There are a number of laws that will come into play, but we do not have, for example, agritourism regional centers that I know they do have in India, which I will probably hear about in the next session, right? Just this year, there has been a proposal set forth in the House of Representatives here to create a Department of Agritourism, right? There's not a lot of detail in this bill, but it's a proposal that would essentially set this kind of center to be a resource, and I presume would then be followed up by regulations with greater detail about what may happen. Now, all I really know about this is that it's been introduced and that it's sitting in the Agricultural Committee of the House of Representatives. So it may be nothing, it may be something, but those of you that might be interested, it's something to keep our eyes open for. Now, in other countries, we do see federal or regional laws supporting agriculture or agritourism specifically, right? So I know in Italy, for example, you have to have agritourism business registrations. There may be certain fiscal considerations, some rules about sanitation and accessibility, but then there's also support for the agritourism operators. India, I know that there are regional centers that have been assisting with agritourism. And again, there does have to be some kind of registration for that. And I'm just going to skip over these because of time, but many other countries give some support, and in a lot of places, and including some states, the registrations that are provided by the small producers then in turn are used to help promote and get involved in marketing, et cetera, at the state level. So US federal laws to consider in engaging in agritourism, like I said, farms are exempt from a certain number of regulations that agritourism operators are not necessarily exempt from. So in doing federal taxes here in the United States, as an example, agritourism will be considered to be a business with a Schedule C profit and loss filing, as opposed to Schedule F, just farm business. Animal Welfare Act, this is a federal law that typically agricultural livestock and farm animals are exempt from. If you are engaged in agritourism, you are not exempt from the animal welfare law, which really, folks that I've met that do agritourism are so far and above the standards, I don't worry about this, but it does mean there can be inspections of the animals, regulations about their shelter and their water and their food and their health, et cetera. And then employment law is a really important consideration, I think, in agritourism. In agricultural law in the United States, there is a difference in terms of how our laws treat agricultural labor and how we treat labor in other industries. For example, in agriculture, employees have to be paid the minimum wage, but that can be either the state or the federal, even if the state law is less than the federal. There are still a few states on the books with minimum wages less than federal, and in every other industry, they mean nothing, right? They can't be followed, right? There's no requirement of overtime in agricultural law, and workers do not have the protections of the National Labor Relations Act, which is about unionization and collective activity. If you are in fact an agritourism operator, you are not engaged in agriculture, and those employees will have to be treated differently than necessarily your farm labor. Okay, so all of that is a little bit of a framework looking at national law. A lot of these exemptions don't exist, but the real nitty-gritty of regulation of agritourism in the United States today happens at the state level, right? And I'm open to questions in between, by the way. I feel like if folks want to jump in, please do so. So again, the central statutes that are relevant, many states, I forget the number because we've had a few new ones in 2022, but the vast majority of US states have statutes that protect agritourism operators from physical injury liability, right? There are also state right to farm laws. These are typically dealing with nuisances. So in other words, if I am an agricultural enterprise and there are noises, there are odors, there are, farm things that may be in existence in that community, very often those farms will be protected from a public nuisance or a private nuisance action against that farm operator, but they're a little bit limited. Some states include in their right to farm laws protection for those same things to agritourism operators, really state specific. And then in some states, specifically where those that do not have specific agritourism laws, there are recreational use laws. So this means if you open your property up to use to the public, you own 100 acres and you don't mind if people come hunt and fish. You don't mind if people come riding their ATVs. These recreational statutes similarly will exempt that landowner from a personal injury kind of activity. So one thing I really wanted to focus on is that there will be requirements under state law that the agritourism operator has to follow in order to get these protections. So most states will require a posted notice, right? Warning tourists coming onto the property of the quote inherent risks of agriculture, right? What are inherent risks? The land's not going to be necessarily even. You can't always predict animal behavior, right? So these sorts of things. Some states require this language being included in contracts. Some states might require certain levels of care being made to make sure that there's no injurious situations, but there still are protections from liability. Many states also require some kind of registration. I'm going to skip over that. And then the last thing, and I will just say that it varies very much state to state. The other issues that arise, which I believe are really important, get to be very local. So you have state, local, you might have township, counties, this drives me crazy, zoning restrictions, right? So you may be zoned agricultural, but once you start doing agritourism, there may be different zoning or building codes that have to be considered. So can you build that extra building on the property? Is it truly agritourism? Taxation may be different. In many states, agricultural sales of products direct from the farms to consumers, producers don't need to collect sales tax. Very clear, the revenues from agritourism in most states, producers will need to collect sales tax and pay sales taxes on that. There may be certain business requirements. If you are serving food in particular, there is likely to be requirements for food establishment licenses, a commercial kitchen, or what you can and can't do in that a non-commercial kitchen. So we really get nitty-gritty into the details. So tax, zoning, event licenses, serving food and accommodations are issues that will often require some kind of permits or registration. And one additional thing I want to say is that most states will provide this protection to agritourism operators for injuries if they meet certain requirements, but also if the activity is truly connected to agriculture, right? So when we go back to those definitions of it's connecting a commercial venture to some sort of tourist activities, so folks learn about the farm, they get to see the farm, they get to pet the animals. When instead the land it's more of a land use issue. You have a wedding barn, for example, or you're opening your land up to events like just a concert. Many states will not consider those to be true agritourism. So the line almost seems to be interacting somehow with the farm as opposed to it just being land use. So what kind of activity you're engaging in will really make a big difference. And I think I will wrap it up there. I have had a couple of examples of the agritourism laws and touch again on right to farm, but I wanted to make sure I had time for questions. So thoughts, considerations? Yeah.
So if you're a farmer and you're farming and you're farming certain crops that are just, you're gonna be selling just as crops but not related to agritourism, do you have any advice on, should they plan on, keeping, really detailed records on what is actual farm crops, what are those agritourism activities? Because I know, one of the things that has been brought up in my job is when you run an event and you're charging $10,000 for a wedding, there's no agritourism aspect with it. So you need to bring in some type of agritourism. Either the food all needs to be farm to table to make it that agritourism experience to heighten the farm. Just wondering if you're a farmer, you're trying to do all these different things, grow those crops, but they're not really those agritourism ones. And then you've got your agritourism activities that you pick. Right. Different events.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I mean, the short answer is absolutely have separate records, right? Because you want to still take advantage of the benefits to agriculture as opposed to agritourism, right? Which means different tax percentages, right? And paying federal taxes, et cetera. So you can do it in such a way where you're just keeping very detailed records, and that will be relevant for your obtaining business permits or your filing a Schedule F with your taxes. A cleaner way might be to create a different entity, right? So that you have a farm entity and perhaps an LLC, for example, that has all of your agritourism activities run through it. That way it's cleaner, it's a little bit of a pain, but and the two entities can interact. And I think it was actually in Dee's presentation yesterday that she talked about a worldwide problem with record keeping. Maybe it wasn't you. Was that you? Yeah, I thought it was. So yeah, I mean, I know it's really hard for farm producers that have a billion things going on, but it's really important.
I'm just thinking from a farm producer standpoint, we have so many platforms to work off, like not to like in a different one over the other, like Square. You can definitely put it in your agricultural ones. You can take and identify it pretty easily. So there's definitely ways to do it.
I'm not as familiar with those. So thanks for that information. Yeah.
I just had a quick question about the taxes. So like you pick a piece of corn off the husk, you don't pay tax on that. If you manufacture and sell it, is that taxable?
So if you manufacture,
say you pick berries, right? Somebody comes and picks berries, they're not going to pay tax, but you take those berries and you make jam out of it, and then you sell the jam.
Yeah. So that will be a little bit state by state. Most states will say, even though that's a value added product, it's not like, the actual berry, so to speak. If it's direct, if you're selling it direct from the farm to consumers, like at your farm stand or people come to the farm,
Farmers market. There's in many states, there's no sales tax. In some states though, in some states there are, once it's processed and manufactured. And the other thing is that if you are selling through retail establishments, then you will have to collect sales taxes. Your local grocery, your co-ops, those sorts of things. But the retailer would collect the tax. You would. Yeah. And then on the farm, T-shirts, right? You have T-shirts and novelties and stuff like that.
That would require sales tax.
Interesting. Thank you.
Sure. And again, it's so hard to teach law and regulations in 20 minutes that could cover like 50 states in every country. So there may be details we'd need to look at. Anything else? I don't know how we are on time.
This is something I do and I hadn't thought about it. So we have a farm stay. We also have a greenhouse that we let our guests pick out of and eat from. We don't charge them to do that. Am I covered under I'm in Oregon, so limited liability agritourism law. So from a health food standpoint, are we covered to let them pick and eat what we've been growing? It never occurred to me that I might not be.
Yeah, you are probably fine.
So my email, my presentation's gone. I have cards too, if you're interested, and I could double check. But most states will have something about exemptions based on invited guests, right? So in other words, a lot of the laws don't necessarily apply if you have an invited guest and you're serving them what you've got on your land and you're not charging them, you should be fine. Like, you know, if I raise a cow and slaughter the cow and feed it to you on my farm, no problem. If I tried selling that without bringing it to an inspection plant, big problem, right?
Okay.
So I think you're fine, but if you'd like to reach out, I'm happy to double check.
Thank you.
And I'm going to guess that we are out of time, and thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you very much. So our next presentation is a pre-recorded one. So we will run the presentation, and I believe the speaker will be available on Zoom to answer any questions. So the next session is evaluation of agritourism policy in India, qualitative impact analysis.
Good morning to everyone. I hope you all enjoyed the national workshop on agritourism there in USA. I think it's been, I'm supposed to be there in person to deliver this presentation, but due to certain unavoidable reasons, I could not be present physically. So that's how I'm presenting you virtually. So this research project is all about evaluating the policy of agritourism, especially in India, and assessing and knowing the impact. How does the agritourism policy has been beneficial to our stakeholders, especially to the farmer, is going to be discussed in subsequent slides. So let's talk and discuss in detail. Everyone knows agritourism has been a known concept and been pursued all across the globe. It's one of the alternative for getting an additional income to a farmer. And this concept is known to the rest of the world. In India, we started this concept back almost 20 years ago. And now this concept is already been established. Fortunately, the policy, the first ever policy related to agritourism is being initiated in the year 2020 in September. Maharashtra state in India was the first state to initiate those policies. And we must thank, we must be knowing Dr. Pandurang Tavle, who is institutional enough and probably it's given a great amount of figure to get to agritourism notice to a government. And because of his efforts also, there are many other parameters on which this policy has been framed. And we hope that farmers, especially those who have started and going to start agritourism are going to be the most beneficial one. So when we design any policy or maybe any framework, so foremost aspect that we discuss is that what is the strategy, how it is going to be planned, and probably how we are going to implement those policy, what would be the potential benefit. So these all have been discussed in the subsequent slide. And we'll try to know that this policy not only just give us support to agritourism and then concept in India, but it will strengthen the other stakeholder and other entities also those who are directly or indirectly helping to make those ecosystem foster and running successfully. So capacity building on our stakeholder is the foremost criteria of any policy, and fortunately government of Maharashtra here in India has tried to get all those stakeholders, try to please all those stakeholders, try to connect and make this agritourism more robust and more accepted towards the society. So we could see that benefit out of those policy implementation in coming days. Collaboration through a public and private partnership is again hallmark and probably is required to make this policy more acceptable. So various entities, private entities and government no doubt, are supposed to work in hand and probably deliver the best of the practices of the agritourism, or maybe to enhance the agritourism in the locality. That is what the ultimate objective. So this is just a brief on how this policy is going to make an impact, and probably how this policy is going to give a benefit to all stakeholders. The prime objectives of the study is to know and to understand the expectations of agritourism owners, especially what we call as the farmers. And we try to know that how much the whole policy has got benefited to the whole ecosystem, what we call as the total stakeholders. So the various stakeholders being taken into consideration. The major stakeholder is more of the farmer here in Indian context. And we had asked them, we had conducted a qualitative research and asked them a few questions based on what do they believe related to the new policy that government had formed. So 21 agritourism center has been selected as an sample, and we went to meet them. We try to understand them what comprehension and implication that they believe out of those policy. So we use purposeful sampling, and we try to make all those answers what we call as their output as a meaningful interpretation for all of us. Now, if we talk about the result of the study, when we interacted with them and we had asked them that whether this policy is really beneficial for them or not, so they really appreciated the policy, and they expressed a very strong desire to take a benefit, and especially in farmer, they like the concept of they're going to get a training, they are going to get a guidance, they are going to help in promoting and marketing their own centers. So these all aspects are going to be covered by the agriculture department, the government department itself. At a central level, I think the agritourism owners probably they were really waiting for this endeavor, and with this policy they got a good backup as such to promote and to exist into the agribusiness, especially the agritourism. Respondents were very pleased with the holistic approach, but there were quite a good number of concerns also. Which includes direct financial assistance if you could they get it from the government as far as the building, the infrastructure is concerned, or maybe giving them best class in kind of services to them. That was one aspect that they really hoping to get into the policy in a better way. Next is about flexible and simplified procedures. Probably one window clearance is the way out. Like farmers will not roam to a different departments at a different place. There could be one office or maybe one window clearance where they just put the one file or maybe ask for permissions, and they will usually get it. So that is what probably expectations from the farmers and the center owners as far as the policy is concerned. This new policy, what I've given them as an advantage is that these agritourism sectors now can be started by the farmer as an individual farmers, no doubt it. But in case you have a cooperative organizations or maybe any university and colleges also can start the agritourism center, which is quite added advantage for the creating and fostering those ecosystems as far as the agritourism is concerned. To implement this agritourism policy, centers owners and farmers are given actually priority in various government schemes, like in running those agritourism as an activity. So while building a farmhouse, while building a farm pond, or maybe in greenhouse, or maybe you want to have a cultivation of the various fruits and vegetables, or maybe floriculture, so or maybe into the sericulture, or maybe honeybee rearing, anything that you wish to start, government are going to help you to get the loan, to get the subsidies. So that's again added advantage being discussed or being laid down by this policy. Additionally, even farmer can take an advantage of the tax benefit and the government subsidies, especially like utility like power and the gas, anything that required to run a typically small size agritourism center. Government are going to give them a tax benefit. So these are the few typical advantages and benefit that policy has made. No doubt, unless those agritourism center owner capitalize and they grab those opportunity to make their agritourism center more successful, this is not going to be possible. Right. So we have seen that several countries has already similar enabling policy to aid those agritourism facilities, farm stays across the globe. Maharashtra, especially in India, we had made an beginning at least in 2020, and very long way to go. And sooner or later, we are going to flourish and probably in global arena. When we talk about an agritourism, we would also be participating, contributing, and elevating the income of the farmers. Farmers across the state can benefit, not only state, in the whole country also. Other states going to get a motivation, and probably they are going to have a new legislation, and the similar kind of policy also going to be probably then rolled out by the central government here. Right, so capacity all across the industry, including the industry, government official, business institutions. In case we were able to do it, that would be along with the policy. That is one of the solutions. So that we ask for. Beyond that, in case this regulatory framework, what is this policy? Making a policy is a good thing that we have to stay in agritourism. But having checkpoints, having rules, setting up good standards, adopting good practices, these all would be then good activities that we can follow foster and make agritourism or a step of. So I think with this, I would like to that agritourism as a destination here in India, just including farming with the policy which exists and how it's going to robust education to farmers and owners. Naturally, we are going to see that there will be a mix of and responsible the policy also in terms of capacity providing assistance. And these are just details about various activities here in India, especially in Maharashtra. So when we visited and tried to gather those information, these some programs being taken, and these are just what you call images, video models of the ecosystem ones, and typically the consumption as a Maharashtra. So that's all about from my side, and I'm open for question and answer if yes, thank you very much.
So listen on mic. Okay, wonderful. Hi, welcome. Do we have any questions in the room?
Yeah, I'm live also.
Okay, wonderful. Do we have any questions online? No? Okay, so we do have a few minutes, Girish, if you wanted to add any comments to your presentation. We do not have any questions, but if there was anything else you wanted to say, we do have some time.
Thank you very much. Been nice experience.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so you don't want to add any additional comments, right?
I just want to Lisa, it's been exceptional. I had seen the way the whole program is going on. I wanted to be there in person, but could not attend, as I mentioned earlier. But I was, seeing it whole day, the whole program, and it is quite mesmerizing. I like the idea of conceptualizing program by itself. When the first agritourism workshop had happened in Italy, I was there, and I wanted to take a part here also, but as I said, I could not. But I think it is exceptional endeavor, and more than, I think, 40 countries been participating, and the representation of, I think, 500 people are virtually and physically participating. It is exceptional. We can actually create a good sustainable world with this agritourism efforts. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, we will go straight into the third presentation. Is that one pre-recorded as well? Okay, so our third presentation is pre-recorded. It's policies and models for developing agritourism in India.
Good evening to everyone. I am Sarath Sennimalai from Nadu Agriculture University. I am going to present my topic on policies and models for developing agritourism in India. It's my pleasure to present my topic in 2022 International Workshop on Agritourism. These are some of the things we're going to see under this topic. That's the introduction, objectives, and methodology, how I have selected my tools for the study, then results and discussion, then models, how I have benefited my models, then policies, then at last as the conclusion. When you show these three different slides, or three different pictures among one customer or any other your own person, ultimately one will select this as the best one is the third pictures. That's the overflowing river Bhavani in Tamil Nadu in our India. See, this is the thing when you take these three different pictures. First one is the time zone. Every person is running out of time. There is no specific time, and there is no particular time they have to cope up with things. Then second one is that all frustrated with their work pressure or any other different type of this environmental things they have to cope up with these things. Then ultimately, so just to relieve from this environment, and they have to take some free or to lesser environment, they have to enjoy, and they have to walk around to the environment, they have to see, they have to know all these things. So this is the thing I would say that it can be achieved through agritourism. See, you all know about the agritourism, because the World Tourism Organization have defined it as the agritourism as is the involvement of the visitors that being where accommodation were given to them, they separate the stores at the farmhouse, then providing the meals and organizing guest activities like you meters the food picking, then sowing, then harvesting, involving farm operations, then cultural operations, then bullock cart ride, then tasting food in the farm itself, then nature walk, then swimming in the farm pond, then walking along with the farm friends. Like this, all these things is the combination of the agritourism. Initially, you all know about the agritourism as the evolved in the developed countries like USA, Italy, and Europe. But in India, it's still in nascent stage. It has to be developed. So India has enormous potential for agritourism. You all know that India is the diverse climate with all type of features, all type of climatic conditions, all type of environment. So here the agritourism is the most suitable one to develop in India. But there is one article in Business Standard they have said that the author he noted that revenue from agritourism is growing at an annual growth rate of 20%. So here I want to thank Mr. Ramadan Tawara. I think he is going to present in this workshop from agritourism development. He established the agritourism development corporation in Maharashtra while during 2014 as a pilot project. Then we established it as a model for by going with the some surveys, some pilot projects. Then after that, evolving into 2017, after that, simultaneously 2017, 18, 2019, the Agritourism Development Corporation has enabled around the group into 350 farmers and they have generated around 60 crores of income. So that's why Maharashtra state government in India has promised separate agritourism policy for agritourism itself. So here this focus, here this study focus on developing agritourism in Tamil Nadu by giving different policies and the models. See, this is the problem of this study. Here the demand for agritourism is growing. That may be due to globalization. I already told that people are living in the frustrated environment. They want to go with lesser and they want to enjoy something. So that they are looking for some other external environment. They want to go and they have to enjoy the family vacation and they have to play with the sand and the soil and they have to bath with the farm water, then all these things they are looking for the some of the new environment that is the combination with the singing bird, that means roaming honeybees, like that all these things. So here in this case, so the demand for agritourism is going to analyze that this study is designed with capturing customer preferences and their willingness to pay, because here this study particularly focusing on the demand of agritourism. So that's why here I have used the customer preferences and their willingness to pay for agritourism, because the increasing customer satisfaction can be enhanced by only providing their customers experiences and then what are the things they are expecting from the agritourism providers. That may be their needs and preferences. What are the things they are looking for? What are the features they want to convey to them? Like these things. So it is especially crucial for the tourism providers operating in the rural territories, because there are the various customer segments that you take it. Maybe housewife, there may be a working person. So all these three, the different persons. So here, keeping in this view, I have gone with these three objectives. That is to analyze customer preferences with reference to agritourism, to assess the willingness to pay for various aspects of agritourism, and to suggest the policies and models for agritourism development. Here, for going with that methodology, I have selected my own base state, that's the Tamil Nadu, because Tamil Nadu is the #1 state in India. Around there are 81 states in India. Here, the Tamil Nadu is enjoying the #1 status in capturing domestic and foreign tourists from 2014 to 2018. Here, I purposely selected the Coimbatore district. There are around 39 districts in Tamil Nadu. Here, I have purposely selected Coimbatore district because the Coimbatore district has different vast environment. That is the combination of all these different environments with the different climatic conditions. So here, other than that, agriculture is the famous for Coimbatore district in Tamil Nadu. So here I have selected the farm resorts, that the location of farm resorts in Coimbatore. Here the customers were randomly selected for the study. In each resort, around 40 customers were selected randomly. That randomly means in the sense that due to their interest, their willingness to respond for this study. Then with the total array of 400 sample respondents, then the further 20 farm resorts were selected, and the owners in the resorts were also connected to know about their expectation and what they are expecting from these agritourism resort, that their models and policies. So here I have collect using the well-developed questionnaire, I have collected the data. That's the general characteristics of the sample respondents, their preferences towards agritourism, their willingness to pay for various aspects of agritourism. Here the collected data were processed in classified and they were organized into some structure using the various tools such as MANOVA, principal component analysis, contingent valuation model, and the distinct choice experiment. When you take the variables, because the variables the foremost one while choosing the tools. Based on the variables, I have selected the tools. Here the MANOVA has been used to determine, but that selected different independent groups that's based on gender, family income, family size, agriculture attachment, and the true frequency, how the frequently customers are listening to the farm results. So based on mainly category dependent variable with these three different things, that's the natural, agriculture, and the cultural features. Under these different features, there are 4 set of variables have been used. Then other than that, PCA was also used to group the variables for knowing customer preferences towards agritourism. Then for identifying the willingness to pay, I have used the contingent valuation model. Under the contingent valuation model, there are 4 elicitation techniques. In that, I have used the payment card approach. Then discrete choice experiment. Here, using the attribute levels and the attributes and the levels, I have calculated the customer willingness to pay for discrete agritourism. So here, let me go with the result and discussion I have identified from this study. Here, from my study, most around the 400 respondents I have selected now. From that, most of the respondents in the study belong to female category. That the thing you can note that female tourists are more interested in visiting agritourism than males. Because the females, their thinking style and their world of that means exploring the outer things, that's the growing nowadays. Then on average, respondents were in younger age because there are the more tourists are the customers visiting to farm resorts were the younger age that falls between 26 to 35. Then more than half of the respondents, the education qualifications were the graduate level. Then in terms of occupation, most of the employees were the most of them were employees, then followed by the housewife, business people, and the students. Then when you take the overall respondents' income, that's around 5 to 10 lakh was the high. So these are the socio-demographic features that I have captured from my study. Then when you take the customer preferences, here the farming and the linkage towards the farm connected customers are mostly visiting to farm resorts. Then most of the customers visit agritourism only sometimes, not rarely and often. Then majority of customers prefer the weekend because when you take the weekend, it's one of the available thing to each and every type of peoples. So here there is there's no doubt because the people are choosing as the weekend as the preferred customer. Then majority of customers prefer to have local and traditional food because the local and traditional food fetches some type of nutritional value. Other than that, it has different taste and the thing is that means in Tamil we used to say as tanichurai because it fetches some different taste, the unique taste when comparing this alternatives to the ultimately the tourists. The visitors, they are selecting the local traditional food. Then most of the customers prefer that the farm resort with the availability of 14 farms, offering accommodation and food with active participation in farm activities. Then when you take in terms of preferred activities, agritourism, most of the customers rank entertainment as their major one. Then followed by hospitality services and educational services and outbound direct sales. Entertainment means in the sense going with the farm, that the natural walk, then bullock cart ride, then swimming in farm pond, then all this type of entertainment features because the people are looking for some type of environment that has the close bonding with the nature. So there is no doubt that people have selected entertainment as their major one. Then when you take landscape features, natural features of the highest value, then followed by agricultural features. Then most of the customers revealed that they were like to see and go with the trekking in forests, see wild animals, bird watching, ponds, lakes, native flowers and wetlands. Then most of the customers would like to see native plants and flowers. However, some customers, the least preferred features among the customers was the farm occupant, followed by farm-related buildings and farm animals. It shows that farm equipments, the farm reserve owners have to keep different farm equipments that like a country plow, then other three different, that is different things. Then they using PCA, some of the factors that have governed under the agritourism features are the 5 features. That's the farm landscape, because farm landscape is the basement for agritourism. Then followed by farm activities. Farm activities in the sense entertainment oriented activities like swimming, then we going with the natural work, all this type of things. Then farm attractions, because the farm attractions, when you take these archaeological related measures, there are some farm methods they are using farm attractive features by keeping these archaeological related features such like instruments, other the old museum related things in their farm to attract their customers. Then farm services means in types of hospitality, that kind and that means in terms of servicing the customers with the wholehearted thing, then treating wholeheartedly, then on their knowing measures, then what are the things they are looking for that. Then at last the farm experience. The farm experience means how the customers they are experiencing particular farm, whether they are opting to come again for their new looking things, they are interested in these things like that. Then I have told that I have used the 2 different features. There's a payment card for SADCJ technical the contingent pricing model. Before that, I have shown this picture to one customer, selected customers. Then based on that, I have asked these questions. Then I have given this numbered, that means values. That's the rupees values. The different rupees values. Then when customers have to go through this statement, then they have to look for these pictures. Then based on that, the customers have to round up which value they can willing to pay for agritourism. In the sense, for example, the customers are selecting 1,200 means okay, that particular customer is willing to pay rupees 1,200 for agritourism. Like that. Then here, from using the payment card approach, I now use the status something. Then from that status something, I now enumerated the results that the comparatively males were willing to pay more than females. Then around 7% of males were willing to pay is 2,800, while females were willing to pay only that means 1.76% from the males. Then percentage of willing to pay level was high among the group. When you take the postgraduate degree holders, then the remaining level of people, that old peoples are housewives, the willing to pay level was high among the youths. Then willing to pay was more among customers with business as their occupation. Just the business peoples, they just normally they are willing to pay level more for occupation. Then here the increase in income level shows more willingness to pay than income with low level customers. Because the income level is the foremost one with the willingness to pay level. It has the unique features. Then agritourism experience shows that willingness to pay was high for often and always repurposing customers. Then customers with the direct agriculture attachment and family members, they shows that willingness to pay level was high. Then overall, most of the customers' willingness to pay level lies from rupees 1,200 to rupees 1,000. Then using the choice model, these are different attributes at the different levels. For this, there are the different description features. Each attribute consists of 3 levels. That's the excellent, good, satisfactory. Based on the attributes, that levels going to vary. Then for that choice, based on the choice experiment, I have using the RStudio software. At last, I have governed with 3 different features. That is the ecological. Most important attributes among these different features were ecological environment is excellent ecological environment, then service landscape, that means the excellent service landscape, then accommodation, because the accommodation nowadays women, that means women tourists or women, they are looking for the same accommodation, that same time develop good accommodation that they are looking for. Then from child experiment, I have about these three most attributes as the most important one among the customers. Then I have already said that I have from this study, I have identified 4 different models. That's the in terms of model one, that is the linking with the traditional farming agritourism. Here the preferred activities includes traditional farming techniques, organic farming like Panchagavya, Jivamutam, then indigenous technical knowledge, then tribal farming, all these things. Here the most customers were willingness to pay more for male, category of customers were male, youths, graduates, and the employees. Here the willingness to pay were more for activities like UP, Ulaka tribe, livestock, swimming, and trade handicap products. Then model 2, that's the food and accommodation in agritourism. Here the preferred items and accommodation includes local and traditional food with rural setting, preferring farm grown food, cottage style accommodation. Then customer who are willing to pay more for food and accommodation in agritourism, where in this model were females. Then people who have business as their operation, their family size, that means more than 6 to 7 members. Here, willingness to pay more for farm processed food, local food, western food, and their beverages. Then, third one is the ecological environment in agritourism. Here, the ecological environment is surrounded by native plants and flowers, varieties of specialty crops, natural surroundings, water resources, tree planting. Then here the customers who are willing to pay more for the ecological environment where females, graduates, youths, and the employees, and the family size 2 to 3 percent. Then at last, the model is the adventures in agritourism. Adventure means in the sense trekking, that's a natural walk inside the forest and the farm operations, livestock experience. Preferably, most of the visitors they are looking for the lazy animals. Then rural games. Then rural games like in Tamil Nadu, there are the Pallaguli, like that. These are the different rural games that you have to know. Then the customers who are going to pay more for adventures as the male, graduates, youths, and the employees as the business and the operations. Here, from these 4 models and all these based on the consulting with farm agritourism providers and the customers, I have at last came with some policy recommendations for framing agritourism policy in Tamil Nadu with respect to India. Here, the state government has to form separate agritourism development committee. That means the committee has to look for how the policy they can be drawn for based on the customers' needs and the agritourism providers. Then the tourism department has to provide a separate license, because the separate license is the foremost one here where the agritourism providers are looking for availing loans and tax benefits. Here the cooperative societies they can be included in providing loan facilities to agritourism providers. Other than that, the local administrations, such as the think local, act global. Act global is the foremost phenomenon. Like that, here the local administrations such as the village panchayats can help in coordination and facilitation of agritourism. Because the village panchayats, the local people has more influence on local communities, and their support is foremost one. Then tourism department has to organize seasonal festivals that they have to know, so that they hear the agritourism is there. Here the under that agritourism there are different features are available like that. Then using the digital technologies and the digital platform like slogan Incredible India inside Tamil Nadu. Based on that, agritourism has to reach the wide reach for the customers. Then rural youths can be trained for agritourism, because nowadays youths are looking for the jobs with the integrated, that means inside the village or in the area. Then so the rural youths can be trained for agritourism by offering diploma or certificate courses. Then awareness of agritourism has to be increased by using the online and social media platforms, because nowadays most of the people are using the Instagrams here. So the Incredible, I have already told that the Incredible India and the Chanting Tamil Nadu digital platform campaign can be used for wide reach of agritourism. Other than that, marketing is the foremost. Here for the marketing, they have to partner with the travel, trade and online platforms. Like Oyo and Make Mention. At least they have to know that the agritourism is there in particular village or in particular area. Then at last, agritourism farms can improve their hospitality services by employing professional training. Then the state government has to organize some workshops to the agritourism providers and in terms of showing their hospitality. Then all these different phenomena, these different features can improve agritourism. Then at last it can govern the Gandhiji code as we are used in its villages. Because agritourism is the combination of these different features like the farmers, village, and as well as the agriculture. So here using these different features, one can use agritourism as their growth for the rural area. So at last, I am concluding that state, central and the state tourism departments have to form separate regional agritourism policy for developing agritourism. Then agritourism providers have to incorporate recommended design features. What are the features they have opted by customers? Then based on the locality, agritourism models have to be developed based on the crop and based on all these things. So from this thing, I urge the government to form state central or state tourism department that policy, central policy how to for farming agritourism in India. So at last, I thank the international workshop on agritourism committee members, especially Professor Lisa Chase for giving this wonderful topic to present this workshop. So I thank each and everyone for this presentation. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And so we are out of time, so we will not entertain any questions for this session. Please feel free to continue speaking with the presenter on the Hova app. And that concludes this session. So we hope you'll join us at 10:20 to continue the conversation. Thank you.